So far, we have been solving or rearranging equations. We can apply the same rules we learned for rearranging equations to rearranging formulas. Namely, whatever we do to the left side of an equation must also be done to the right. We use inverse operations to move terms from one side of the equal sign to the other. For the first example, we will look at the formula for the volume of a cylinder. The formula has several variables. There's volume, radius, and height. We're going to rearrange this formula for the radius so that instead of volume equals, it will be rewritten to say radius equals. Notice that radius is squared. In order to isolate the radius, we need to isolate the term containing the radius, which means that we're going to isolate radius squared first. Looking at the other variables with radius squared, pi is being multiplied with radius squared, and height is also being multiplied with radius squared. Remember inverse operations on the opposite side of the equation so that we can isolate r squared. So we're going to divide the volume by pi and also divide the volume at the same time by height. So we'll take the volume and we're going to divide it by pi, because remember pi is being multiplied with radius squared on the other side of the equation, and we are also going to divide by height at the same time, because height is also being multiplied by radius squared on the other side of the equation. So we've done the opposite mathematical operations on the other side of the equation. So our first step was to isolate the term. We isolated the term containing the variable. Our next step would be to isolate the variable. So we need to get r squared to be r. Now the opposite of squaring would be to take the square root. We need to do the opposite mathematical operation on the other side of the equation. So we're going to take the square root on the other side of the equation. Square root volume divided by pi h is equal to r. So the second step was to isolate the variable. In keeping with writing the variable on the left side, we can simply rewrite the formula with r isolated on the left, or at the start you could have rearranged the equation by simply exchanging the left and the right side and then isolating from there. In our second example, we are going to look at a formula for the equation of a line. We're going to become very familiar with this equation in grade 9. The equation is y equals mx plus b. We're going to rearrange this equation for x, so that instead of saying y equals, it will be written as x equals. Remember, our first step is to isolate the term. So we're going to isolate the term that contains the variable. So we're going to be isolating mx. Mx is being added with b. So I'm going to subtract b on the other side of the equation. I've isolated the term. Now the next step would be to isolate the variable. The variable is being multiplied with m. So I will need to divide m on the other side of the equation. We can rewrite it so that x is isolated on the left side. We will practice rearranging formulas in class.